Okay, we are live. Are we
Yay.
live? Okay, welcome.
Thank
For those of
you.
you who don't know me, my name is Padma. I am a hmm, embodiment coach in some ways, but I'm a movement therapist, a body worker, an energy healer, and an intuitive. So from the most subtle to the most dense, I like playing in all fields. And I'm brought a dear, beloved Kristen to come and have a conversation just about being a woman, embodiment, feminine rising, and anything else that sparks us. So I'm just going to let her introduce herself.
Yes, hello, Padma. It's so wonderful to be here. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you and learn from you. I am, gosh, I have an umbrella as well that I work under. I am the founder of Women in Love and Leadership, which is my coaching and consulting business. But my background, I have about 20 years of experience in conflict resolution and intercultural and interpersonal communication. That's what my graduate degree is in, and those are the sort of areas I worked in organizations for a couple of decades before the pandemic hit, at which point I found myself sort of at the edge of a wall of burnout and decided to pivot to something that was much more personal and interpersonal. So that's when I, about 5 years
Mhm.
ago, moved into transformational work and specifically working with women who are just struggling between all of the demands of personal and professional life and who are really seeking a centered, integrated approach to bringing all of themselves and the areas of their lives together instead of this constant kind of pulling outside of ourselves, bringing it all back inside. So that's what I love doing right now.
Yay. So it's almost like moving the external, the conflict, which is very interesting, right? It's very poignant to this time. It's like the external conflict and the internal conflict.
Yes.
And right,
Yes.
bringing
And
it,
they're so interconnected.
they are, they are. I think that we don't always see that, right? That this conversation with ourself or this, right? Sometimes I feel it in my own body as a conversation. Sometimes it feels like a avoidance of or a dissociation or just not wanting to look at something or too afraid. It's very interesting. And that also happens out in the world, right? That it echoes out into other relationships, right? Beyond the relationship with myself. So I like that kind of mirroring in a way that
I love
speaks
that
to.
too. Yes. It's interesting. I found that when I was in that world of conflict resolution, the work that I loved, the programs and the transformations that I saw in communities were often between groups, especially were often led by women. But what I saw is that the impact of the work oftentimes and the scaling up of the work was frequently limited because there was so much in interpersonal dynamics that hadn't shifted. And so then I moved my work to interpersonal dynamics to try to really support people to shift how we're engaging with one another. And that was an incredible part of my journey until I realized that we can't really change how we engage with one another until we change how we engage with ourselves. So that's what really led me to make that shift because who we're being in our families and our work and in our bigger systems is a really that reflection of who we're being inside of us, what our
Yeah.
beliefs, our identity, our knowing. And so often for women, those beliefs inside are really limited and restricted and programmed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, right? The feminine rising aspect. And I know that there's just even in the kind of energetic, right, or more spiritual, right, ideas of more feminine energy coming in. But what has felt to me is for a while, probably, I don't know, I started becoming very aware of it during the last Trump election with Hillary and how much conflict we have within ourselves, with other women, with mother figures, with female authority figures, right? That there is this weaving that is needing to happen, and I definitely feel the shift in that, this weaving that is happening within ourselves, right? This, what does it mean to be a female, or more, because I don't think of feminine necessarily as gender based, right? I think that feminine is, men are feminine and masculine, women are feminine and masculine. But how do we, as a woman, hold our own femininity? How does our culture hold that femininity within the men and the women? Like, how do we embrace it? And at the same time, I think the awareness of how we haven't held it, how it's been oppressed. Like, I think of my grandmother, and she didn't have her own name. She didn't have her own bank account. She had Mrs. John Hanson.
Mhm. Wow. Oh my goodness.
Right. And
Isn't that
that,
amazing to even try to kind of wrap our minds around a,
yeah,
a, a sovereign person who didn't have their own name, their own agency because she was a
right,
woman.
right, because she was a woman. But I meet women who, I mean, I have a friend who left her husband, and it took years because of money and ownership over who has more money, who has more control. Right. So that just plays into how we perceive ourselves. Right. And I know I have many women who are the breadwinners and who are quite capable of running a company and a home. But what does it mean to be feminine for each of us? Right. That we're in this place of, what does that mean individually and then collectively? Right. That expression outward. And what does that mean to have more feminine energy in?
Yes. Yes. I think that's the question, really one of the most important questions of the time that we're in for me. Um, because we have, I think, like what you're speaking to with your grandmother, that sense of the feminine was associated with and synonymous with weakness for so
Mhm.
long, historically, and across cultures, almost without exception, as a part of these patriarchal structures we live in, right? And so it's almost, to me, it feels like, what is it to redeem and bring back a sense of the feminine that is not associated with or considered weak, and that has a sense of empowerment that's not power over, because a lot of the masculine structures that are very much rooted in the masculine are also maybe not all that balanced either. All of the overproducing, all of the ways that we push ourselves, that we put too many demands on ourselves, and that, all of the overwork and the stress and these things that we hear about so often these days. I experienced it myself in a very masculine field and culture, this sense of everything being on the outside. And, that can only go on so far and so long before it
Mhm.
becomes destructive. It becomes exhausting. It becomes deeply imbalanced. And so I love that question. It's like, to me, it's like, how do we invite the feminine back in? And it's beginning to create space, because I think an empowered feminine has been absent largely for quite some time in culture and societies. And so individually and collectively, I don't really know that we have a clear idea or a sense of what it is to bring in the feminine. But I really sense that it is the most essential kind of, really, momentum in society, in us individually and collectively at the moment, this movement toward bringing things back into balance for all of us individually, but also for the planet, for our societies. And
Mhm.
so I think I sense that's why we have such a, it seems like even 5 years ago, it wasn't nearly as kind of mainstream to speak about the feminine rising as it is today. It's becoming more and more kind of something that's generally in awareness in the collective. But, it's one thing to speak about it. It's like, how do we actually bring it back to embodiment? How do we actually embody that in our day-to-day lives? when so much of what we do and know is defined by that external masculine lens and view of value.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And I even find myself, because I have been conditioned in this culture, right? That every once in a while I'm like, well, what are they going to do? Right? What are they going to do? And I guess what helps me the most is to really break it down into energy, right? Like that masculine is more focused, more linear, more directive, more like there's just a different quality, can be more fiery, um, right? And the feminine more. Again, these are just qualities. These are qualities in nature. These are qualities in the universe. It's not just the body of a woman or the body of a man. Um, and including all genders, right? That
Yeah. Yeah.
really is like, how do we bring, or even just finishing that thought of like the energy of women being more diffuse in some ways, right? I tend to think of like the energy before form, right? That the masculine is more and again, this is different in different kind of spiritual ideologies, but it's like the vastness of the universe. And then when things come into form, they're just different qualities, right? Even thinking of like being able to hold multiple views or one view, right? That there's not one is better or right. We need both, depending on what it is, right? And that the masculine and the feminine work together. They're interconnected, right? Like the yin and the yang, they are not separate.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what helps me, right? Is to break it down energetically and then kind of, okay, what does that mean on very simple things? Parenting, what does that mean? When do I step into the role of being more like directive?
This is
and,
how it goes. This is
right,
what we're
especially
doing.
as a single mom, because I have to play both okay, I can hold all your emotions, I can hold
Yes.
the potential for things not being okay and the potential for things being okay, right?
Yes.
Place of
Yes.
instability and stability, the place of you wanting to, buck against me and you needing nourishment from me. I can hold that. And then there's the other times where it's like, no,
That is not okay.
that is clearly not okay. Um, right. And how to hold that within myself,
Yes.
right? That own conversation with myself. Like, do I need to push and drive and um like isolate ideas? Yes, I do. Sometimes I do in order to run a business. And then do I need to step back and open up and feel into all the different qualities that are asked to be heard or asking to be
Yes.
heard?
Yes. That's so beautiful, Padma. I really sense that is the secret sauce. Like that's sort of, if there was, I don't, we were just talking before this recording about how formulas are kind of, often unfulfilled promises, shall we say.
Mm,
But I really sense if there is um, one really deeply true sort of key that has made the biggest impact for me in my own journey the past 5 years, it's been learning to, because we are so programmed and indoctrinated from childhood in the value of that strong linear masculine, the competitive, the comparisons, the, productivity, the success and stand out and, present and all of those things that are not good or bad. It's not sort of a moral judgment. It's just one side of the whole, one piece, and an important one, but not the whole picture. And so what's been so meaningful to me has been learning, just as you're sharing, how to hold, it's like, how do we hold the uncomfortable? How do we hold the uncertain? How do we the conflicting, what feels like, in conflict resolution, we see this all the time. One side's right and one side's wrong, but then they also believe they're right and they're wrong. And what really is true is somewhere in between, in the both and, that middle. Really, it's very nebulous. There's no absolute. Because of our systems and structures for so long, many of us have been. I know I was raised with a really strong sense of absolute philosophy, ideology, spirituality, morality, all of those things to first and foremost judge. And and sometimes strong judgment is needed, as you said, when your child is like, I'm going to go do this, or when a strong decision needs to be made in relation to a business choice or a situation or whatever it may be. Certainly in governance, we need people who can make decisions. We don't want to just sit around and like explore forever. Um, but then there is the flip side of that strongly decisive coin, to me, is that is often absent, is that space where we really can explore what a deeper, truer reality is that is shared for everyone. That space between the two sides where we can say, wait, isn't there a place that we could both honor this and honor that? Isn't there a place where I can both honor my child's feelings and honor the fact that as a parent, I have a certain responsibility to show up and care for them and nurture them and guide them in a way that is helpful and really good for their well-being overall. And to me, that's what brings in that balance of the feminine
Mm,
that's so, so important. And, up until quite recently, very much not as acceptable, invited, welcomed, understood, maybe in general society. So that to me is the piece that I'm most excited about, simply because it's what I sense will bring it all back into greater equanimity.
yeah, I agree. And even bringing in because I think bringing in the feminine, even within men, right? Because I've watched how my son is treated and expected to behave and taught by other boys and other men how to behave. And that also feels important, right? That there is a right opening up more potential for them to be emotional and focused and right directive and like all the aspects that they need to be, right, instead of compartmentalizing, right, which has been, whereas I think women have stepped into being more masculine and being in the workforce and being more assertive or almost in the way of like I can do both. It's
Mm.
the both and, but I can play both roles, which many women do, especially in the single parent households. But um, like the acknowledgement that we have both. And I also think there's something about I have a teacher that she talks about right brain, left brain, and
Mm.
right the left side of the brain, right side of the body, right side of the brain, left side of the body. Right. So in energy work and body mapping, we focus on right side as masculine and left side as feminine, right? That and even taking it more energetically in right relationship to masculine energies, not just our own masculine energy, but to father and brother and
Mm.
ancestrally to the masculine side, and same with the more feminine. But there's also this sense of right that it then because we are imprinted by our fathers and our mothers, right, imprinted by their brains, by their bodies, by their nervous systems. But there's also this part of the relationship, right, that the feminine is more relational, whereas the masculine
Mm.
can be more analytical, right? There's the judgment versus discernment, right? That one brings us maybe more in to relationship and one is more neutral or separate. And again, not right or wrong, but it's just different qualities. And so that relational part as humans, as right, as parents, as community members, as family
Yes, you mean
members.
we have to deal with other humans and be in relationship? It's unavoidable.
Yeah, that it's part of this power over, right? Which has been kind of the, these big powers that have been running things. And there's been a lot of, in some ways, I don't know, maybe safety in that, right? I hear that there's a safety and there's a protector and there's someone who's watching out for me, which um I get that feeling that is feels really good, but I don't know if that's what's happening. And so then there's the power amongst or power within, right? That we get to shift, and you alluded to that, and that just that how do we get comfortable with having more ownership of our body, of our thoughts, emotions, of our relationships, like really bringing it into a very simple place. And then within our family members, I mean, that's challenging sometimes.
Yes, yes. Well,
And
and
our
I
neighbors.
right. You don't get to choose either. Family members or neighbors oftentimes. Not without exception, but yes, well, and what you're sharing is so poignant and important for our times, I think,
Mm,
because, you know, like you should, all these old structures, all these external systems are beginning to, if not, some will say they're crumbling and maybe they're not crumbling, but there are cracks, visible. Like we can actually see the places that systems aren't working. Um, and so long as the systems are in charge and we're sort of we have the child role and they're the parents, right? We don't, first of all, we have someone to blame if something goes wrong. So that's nice and convenient, but it doesn't solve anything. But we also have less responsibility,
mm,
in that role where you're in a lesser role, which traditionally children are, we're seen culturally in societies as having a lesser role, a less full-fledged role. There wasn't as much responsibility placed on them. And, in a home that makes sense. You don't put this responsibility on a 5-year-old, you do on a 16-year-old. But, in a society, and I also found in homes, in my home with my kids, I have a teenager and a young one at home still. And, there is a need to grow and cultivate responsibility. There is a need for, to not have sort of this hierarchical sense of power over. It's not to say they run the house. That would be chaos. But, if we aren't all taking responsibility, it becomes difficult to manage very quickly. It becomes difficult to enjoy very quickly. And I think that metaphor is true to the wider societies that we live in. When there is always something out there that's responsible, then we ourselves needn't step up to ask the questions, to look for the answers, to inquire as to what's really deeply true
mm,
for ourselves and for each other. We don't have to have the conversations. We can just sit there and be mad and blame when we're not part of the equation of change, when we're not responsible for our roles. And so I love the idea of bringing, you know, bringing what our power center back within and really allowing individuals to find that rooted center of their own truth, their own deeper knowing of what is. Because to me, I think in the sort of hierarchical parent-child relationship, there's the sense that if we start to become empowered, that, all hell will break loose, there'll be chaos. We're all narcissistic, self-centered beings, and so we need somebody on top to keep us in control. But that's not really what's true. And, even with children, the more empowered they are, the more they take responsibility for themselves. And actually, I've found with my kids, they become more compassionate and more willing to work with others and see other sides than when there's a top-down sort of approach to rule. Um, and so I really sense that as we evolve into this sense of our own, what's most important inside of us, within us, our relationships with others become more evolved, more beautiful, more open to possibilities. And that's, just in the interpersonal dynamic, but expanding that
Mm.
out across societies, suddenly we have space for everyone that doesn't, and there doesn't necessarily have to be one side or the other. It's more of a power sharing, as you said, power with and within. And I sense that's, with the way that the world is moving, that's really the only model I can imagine that would actually serve everyone, because majority rule is very much power over. If 51 people want it this way and 49 people want it that way, you win, we lose, and tough luck. And
Yeah,
that's never resulted in peace and well-being in societies.
yeah, that's beautiful. I love hearing that. What a beautiful just environment, right? To feel into, to feel your family feels really good. Um,
Hmm, thank you.
I, yeah, because I think that there is a lot of reliance on that, even though women have been kind of in the background, there is a lot of reliance on women to hold the emotional space, or the more feminine or the more relational centric person. Um, because otherwise, who gets left out? The children, the elder, the disabled, those who aren't maybe the producers, but who have something that we need. Um, I grew up with a brother who is disabled, and he's not a producer. He will never be a producer, but he has um, influenced everyone around him in a very unusually positive way, right? Just in his character, but also in his vulnerability, right? That it's taught me how to protect, that there's certain people need to be protected because they can't be producers, or teaching me compassion when because I don't always have that. I would like to think that I do, but I don't always. Or um just like seeing the world from his eyes, like from his eyes.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Wow.
or it's, or seeing, half of my family is brown, half is white, right? Seeing that it's very different for the people with darker skin, like wildly different. And to be able to see that,
Hmm.
right? That all of these, like the power with, and or the relational place, is really so we can stay in our heart, right? So that it isn't power over, it isn't what can I get for you transactional, because it doesn't feel good. And I do think that it does create a society that's more competitive, feels fearful of others, fearful of the neighbors, um,
Hmm.
that we become less trustworthy because we're in fear,
Yes.
right? And that if in that way of holding others, I mean, I love seeing, I don't really love seeing it, but when there is these wild, the fires in LA, or the storms or the wars, like it brings people together. Maybe it's not quite where we want it yet, but it does bring people together, because it doesn't matter when everything's stripped away. It doesn't matter.
Hmm. Yes. All that's left is humanity, right? We
All
all.
that's left is like, we need to help each other through this,
Hmm.
because there's no other way forward.
Yes. Wow.
And that goes back to what you were saying. I agree that that's in some ways where I think we're going, unfortunately. But um I know sometimes I think it's going to be a little bit of a rough ride, but I think where we're going is really
It's worth it.
but well, it's what we want, right?
Yes.
But I don't think the other feels good, right? To sit into fear and lack and not trusting the world is not a great
Mhm.
place. It doesn't feel good.
No. And that's where that transition, like you said, it can be pretty rocky to be in that transition from an old way that clearly isn't really serving and working anymore, if it ever was, to something different, because moving into the unknown is challenging, and making it up as we go, creating as we go, as we're outgrowing old structures is not an easy task. But when we were kids, my mom used to always talk about, in terms of growth, like, crabs, when they outgrow their shell and they have to shed that shell. And then for a while, they're soft shelled. They're running around without a whole lot of defenses, and hopefully they're not picked off by a bird. But they, ultimately find a new shell and grow into that shell and learn a new way. And I think that it's the cocoon to the caterpillar cocoon butterfly metaphor, is having to let some things fall apart so that new things can emerge. And there's a lot of vulnerability there. And, like you said, like really looking inside to find compassion, to connect with humanity, to learn new ways when the old ways are not working anymore. And I think it takes a lot of courage
It
to be
does.
willing to do that. It's a lot easier to probably hunker down and go with what isn't working but is comfortable and familiar, and stay in the old. But I think what we're seeing, and it makes me really hopeful, is that more and more people are, dissatisfied and unwilling to stay in old ways. And so then there is that opening. It's like that little crack of the door to see what else is possible, and the willingness to
Yeah.
explore and innovate and share and collaborate and grow together.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I do think, as you were sharing it, just that vulnerability that you spoke to is so important, because I think that is the thing that helps us transition. I mean, I know for myself that sometimes the emotions, right? Because I also feel um, that we are sensitive, right? And I think that has been, again, that's part of the feminine, masculine. Feminine is more sensitive, and that's part of just it. It just is, right? And I think that the sensitivity to ourselves and to others is really important. And at the same time, because there's been a lot of maybe, I mean, I've been told I'm too sensitive my whole life. And now I'm just at the point like, yeah, but I can cry and move through things. So
But I'm not repressed.
leave me alone. But I still struggle with it because there is a lot of
Yes.
shame. There is a lot of labeling, or there's a lot of ways I think that it can get really sticky, because we don't live in a culture that's like, yeah, of course you're feeling that. Feel it, just like feel it fully, because then it's gone, right? Or it's transmuted, or it's become something else, right? It's like watching a 3-year-old. They get like, they have
A
a temper
beautiful
tantrum.
meltdown.
Right, they have a beautiful meltdown, and then they're playing with something, and then they're tired and they lay down, and then they're hungry, and then they're like, it doesn't stay in one thing. It just keeps moving to
Yes.
the next thing. And as
Mhm.
adults, I can hold something in, right? And I can hold it for a long time if I want to.
I learned the hard way that eventually there's an eruption,
Right.
a
Right.
grown-up meltdown.
Yeah, or finding ways to hold myself so that I can feel something and not berate myself or judge myself or compare myself, or um which you spoke to in the beginning, like all of these things that we do.
Mm,
How do we move through, like how do we be vulnerable, hold space for ourselves enough to allow us to be who we are, that being angry doesn't it's not the truth of who we are, right? And that there might be a wisdom in it, right? I know
mm,
um
yes.
right, that sometimes I think I was very angry as a young person, and then I, through a lot of spiritual bypassing, learned how to I'm not supposed to be like that. Anger is bad. And
Yes. I
and
had a
that
similar experience.
yeah, and
I
that's
learned to be very gentle and peaceful and loving.
right. But it turned into a lot of depression for me.
Mm.
And so like letting myself be angry, and sometimes I need to be angry to move either myself through something or to stop taking responsibility for something that actually isn't mine.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like
Mm.
honoring that there's something in our emotions to help
And
us
that's a paradigm shift,
move.
right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Somebody said the other day, she's like, resentment can be a gift. And somebody else asked, well, how can resentment be a gift? Right. Again, because especially if we are drawn towards spirituality, resentment is bad.
Negative energy or yeah.
Yeah, you're low vibe or
Lower
whatever it
vibration.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's like, because if you're resentful about something, that there's a sense of injustice,
Mm.
right? That there's an ability to look, check in and see, where is that injustice? Is it
Yes.
in this moment? Is it an old injustice? Like, just being able to have the conversation, or the just not being making it bad, right?
Mm.
That it is, and it's something to dance with.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Dance with. Well, and it's a signpost, right? It's pointing somewhere that is probably very deeply valuable. I know for me, I used to worry a lot as a mom, especially when my kids were younger, and it would sometimes eat me up. It was like I would feel so tense and anxious about something that if I zoom out and see it now, probably wasn't really that big of a deal, honestly. At the time, it felt really big. And at one point, it was starting to feel, kind of debilitating. And I sat with it. I just took like an hour to really try to experience what was there one time, a couple of years back. And I realized when I was willing to hold it and be with it and allow some softness around it and not hold it so tightly, because it was like, on the one hand, the worry was big and scary and causing anxiety. On the other hand, I thought, well, I'm not a good mom if I'm worrying. So it was like a whole lot of shame and judgment and tension there, which wasn't, none of that was helpful for me or my kids. But in those moments, what I could see when I was willing to be with it is that the worry was actually just a really deep desire, for goodness for my children and a whole lot of love and a whole lot of my own maternal yearning just for them to have these amazing experiences and lives and opportunities and I could actually really appreciate the beauty of that, and it's like that's not a dangerous thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's not a scary thing. It's a really loving, it was sort of turned in on itself. So it was coming out as a lot of stress and anxiety and worry. But in actuality, it was just, I love them so damn much. I don't know what to do. And then that allowed me to give some space, like, oh, well, I can love them and they can also figure things out. I can love them and hold
Mhm.
goodness for them, and they can also make mistakes and struggle some because that'll make them stronger in the long term, just like it has for me. So I love what you shared about really the power of feelings and
Mm,
vulnerability, because in a really externally driven culture that is kind of that more masculine vein, there's that sense like you shared, it's like productivity is the value and being able to outperform others is the value and be able to hold it all in and not show any weakness and I'm struggling. I'm like, is there a real value in that? Well, probably tempered with a lot of other qualities. There is some value to that held within other, you know, held with compassion, held with curiosity. We do want to get somewhere in life. At some point we want to keep growing and moving forward. So there is value to momentum and action and all of those pieces. And at the same time, you know, if we're just producing, where's the humanity in that? If we're not able to be, if for me it feels like we have this palette of colors, and the masculine and feminine are really, being able to paint with all of the colors, and having all of our feelings, the joy and the sorrow, is also being able to paint with all of the colors of humanity, of being a human on the planet. And when I deprive myself of the feminine, or I deprive myself of sorrow, or I deprive myself of part of my human condition as a being on the planet, I'm not experiencing all that is there to experience. And so it's almost like there's, part of me is cut off, part of me is not able to be fully expressed. And I sense that as we're evolving, there are more and more of us who are not willing to paint with part of the colors, part of the palette, to just say, well, these colors aren't allowed. We're only sticking with these because they're productive and, they look good in this context. And I think that's a really beautiful evolution. It's
Yeah,
messy.
it is
Learning
nice.
to paint with new colors, it's messy.
But it also makes space for all of us, right? For all of who we are.
Mm.
And I love how you said that. Just that it just allows us to be more in life and not be so um, either afraid to be who we are or to judge who we are or to judge others, right? It's a lot of it's a lot of energy. It's very exhausting.
Always judging.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's just something that we all have, right? That it's just been part of this collective game, and that it's just doesn't feel good anymore, right?
No.
It's time to shift. And I love how you speak about your family and being a mom and how that shows up, because it is like this daily conversation as a parent that when as a holder of another person, as a protector, as a guardian, as a guide, as a not a guardian. I remember meeting this woman once, and she said she was an older mom and she had a 4-year-old. And the way she spoke about him, she was so wise. I don't remember how old she was, but she was probably late 40s. And she just spoke about him like, well, I don't really own him. He's his own person. And she really just spoke about him like he was this magnificent being that she was able to hang out with and just like guide him a little bit on his journey. And I was
Oh,
so like,
amazing.
which I don't know if I do. I don't know if I do that with my son, but there is a lot of it is that relational, like what's too much and what's too little and how invested. And I think that's actually really beautiful. I think that investment in each other and investment in our children is beautiful.
Mm.
And that, yes, it does. There is that negotiating sometimes, right? The place where we need to have more ease on ourselves and ease on them. And again, it like can bring up old fear, right? Old
Yeah.
either past fear or collective fear or
Mm.
yeah, and just that honoring. It was really beautiful to watch you speak about it in your own um just to see the shift in you
Mm.
about it.
I love that idea. It's my New Year's theme. This year, I decided I dedicated this year as a year of self-honoring. And
Mhm.
that came through to me so clearly at the end of last year. And it was actually very much a relational, even though it sounds like it's about me, desire I've been feeling, because I just see that the more I am able to honor myself in all parts, in all areas, the fullness of me, the more that I'm able to honor my family, my kids, my spouse, all of the people around, the people I work with, and it's because when we're in that, like you share that judgmental space, it pulls so much energy when we're judging ourselves. These parts of me are okay, and these parts of me are not okay. These feelings are good. These feelings, no, nobody can see them. They're, scary or bad or not strong or whatever that is. When we're doing that to ourselves, then we're doing it to others. And that takes a lot of energy from us, but it also causes that friction, that real push and pull, because I'm judging them and they're trying not to be judged while also judging themselves. And so there's a whole lot of, this kind of friction on the line between us. And it's so interesting because that is a very programmed, and there's, much better than I do, but there's a nervous system component to it, to those fears that get stirred up in us about our survival in relation to how we connect with one another. But at the end of the day, when we're able to release and relax and be more fully wholly ourselves without having to judge or control it, so carefully, and we give other people the space to do that, it's like what we create between us and around us is really beautiful. It's such
Mm,
a it's such a different experience of being in connection with each other and ourselves. And I really sense it emanates from like that self-honoring, that like me being fully with me allows me to be fully with them. And then, like you shared, like from that wiser mom perspective of like, that is a full-fledged being. He may only be 7. And so he does some really funny things, and he's adorable and, smaller and amazing in his own smaller physical form, but he's a full-fledged being and he's growing every day. And me being able to honor that as a mom, it's such a gift versus like, oh, no, you can't do that. No, you have to do this. No, the kind of controlling, micromanaging model that many of us were raised with
mhm.
of
Yeah.
who you should be, what you should do, what is not okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 Definitely. You do as I say.
What is I do?
I know it's so funny. All those phrases that I want my child to be afraid of me. There's so many things that I've heard that I'm like, I'm so glad that's shifting a little. But
Yes.
but I really love, and it's probably a good place to end. We could keep going, but really like I had to write it down, self-honoring. It just felt really potent the way that you said it, and it makes me cry a little bit just thinking about that, right? That honoring. And this is where I think embodiment for me is this kind of bridging of our, because I don't really think they're separate, right? I don't really think that this, little microcosm is different than the macrocosm. Like there's so much intelligence in here and desire for wholeness and integrity and healing and honoring, right? A sacredness. And that it's not only in here, it's out there, right? And that I get to explore that universe inside of me, and let it ripple out.
Mm.
And that really, these this body, this heart, this mind, this soul that we are is really an amazing, it's really amazing what we're capable of,
Mm.
and I think we touched on that a little bit earlier. Just, I mean, I really do think that we have an incredible capacity that we don't even fully understand yet because of this smallness that we've been living in. And I
Mm.
love that it just felt really potent, self-honoring, like really acknowledging the vastness of that, how much that opens up when we can really turn towards ourselves as potent, kind of magical, sophisticated beings.
Who are also incredibly messy.
Absolutely.
I love that. Yes. Yes. That's my sort of morning kind of reflection, is that how do I honor the divine and the human in me and in you and in you and in us, and the very beautiful divinity of everything around us, and also the very practical you know forms that in some ways feel very limited and limiting, and how to hold both. And I really
Yeah.
I love what you're sharing, because I just, if we honor the depth of what's within us, it seems to me, instead of that kind of external pushing beyond model that so many of us were raised with, the go, 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 overproduce, overperform, all that stuff, which depletes us and the earth. If we were to really just honor deeply what's within ourselves and everyone, I just can imagine how much more we would create, not more quantitatively per se, it's like it wouldn't necessarily mean like we're producing like a conveyor belt worth of stuff, but create how much more goodness we would create on the
Mhm.
planet from that deeper place versus how
Absolutely.
much we'd overproduce.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, because it's like nourishment, that expansion just allows us to, I mean, that the other stuff is less important, right? Because some of those things come from a place of deficiency or lack, right? And when there is that fullness, I mean, I know for me that when I feel full, life is very different. And when I'm depleted,
Mm.
that's when it gets a little trickier, right? That it really is like coming back to the fullness, the recognition that I need the fullness and the
Honoring that.
and that, yeah, and I love that, back to the self-honoring. And
Mm.
yes, and again, then the recognition of the messiness and the humanness and the places of not being able to hold ourselves and needing others to hold us, and that it's all okay, that it's all an honoring.
Mm. Oh, I love that. Wow. Oh, I just felt that so deeply. What if we could all just embrace that it's all okay? It seems such a simple message, but it's so powerful for the times that we're in
Yeah,
and so needed.
and not like it's all good, it's all good.
Right.
It's like it's okay to be messy. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. And that the vulnerability of that and the softening into that and asking for help or receiving help if somebody notices and offers.
Mm. Wow. Yes, that's it. It's okay to know. It's okay to not know. It's okay to help. It's okay to be helped. Yes. Then we don't have to choose. That's the path of not having to judge one right and one wrong.
Right. Just like it's okay to speak up. It's okay to be afraid to speak up.
Mm. Yes.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
okay to want change. It's okay to not know how to change.
Yeah, I'm one of my favorite things about being a mom is that my kids are very tuned into their emotions. They're both boys, the ones that are under my roof right now, but um and they share with me all the time, which I don't think I did as a child with myself or others, including my parents. So I'm always so in awe of their fluency.
Mm,
And they'll say, i'm I'm doing this and this thing, and I'd say, oh, how do you feel? And I'm excited and I'm nervous, and they're happy enough to hold both, or excited and nervous enough to feel both, and the ways that they are able to communicate and hold, well, yeah, this is exciting, but it's also scary, and both are true and both are okay, and they can tolerate both. you
mm.
know, I'm excited for this, but I have no idea if I'm going to do well. Like when I was a kid, I could only be excited if I thought I was going to do really well. And otherwise I was going, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this, but I love that as a model of what's possible. I really want to do this. I'm really excited about it, but I have no idea if I can do it. I might be a complete mess when I try to do this. And what if that's okay? And I'm going to try it anyway or not. Maybe I decide I'm not ready to try it.
Yeah,
And
I
what
think
if
that's what
both
I
are
love about
okay?
the younger generation, that they are really clued in a little bit more about, because I think that in my generation, it wasn't, you just had to do it this way. It wasn't really an option.
Who cares how you feel? Yeah.
Exactly. So I mean that's one thing that I really love around about being around younger people. I think that they have something that my generation didn't have. And I love it.
Mm. They're teaching us.
The teenagers, the little ones, I had two little ones over last night. So I had my teenager and two little ones, a 3 and a 6-year-old. And oh my God, I was like, this is so great.
The wisdom, right? I mean, sometimes my 7-year-old, something pops out of his mouth, and I'm going, where did you, wow, let me write that down.
Exactly.
I need to
Exactly.
remember that one. Mm.
Exactly. Yeah, so wise in so many ways.
They are. Oh my goodness. And to honor that, it's like the greatest gift
Yeah.
as a parent.
Yeah. Yeah. It is such a gift. All right, my dear. Thank you so much.
Thank
And I would
you.
love to do this again because there's
I
so
would
much to
also.
talk about.
We could just keep going.
I know, I
Thank
know.
you.
Well, just in honoring of this new year, I know we are um I'm starting a 21-day thing next year for the Chinese New Year, right? So we have like
Ooh.
a new energetic shift. Which I like that because we're in this like new year, January, and then we'll have another kind of new energy. And it just feels really, strong and intense and potent. And so I hope this is helpful for
Mm.
those listening.
Wow. I love that. Thank you for the reminder of the Lunar New Year. Well, it's
Yeah.
been so amazing to have the opportunity to talk with you and share with you and learn from you.
Uh, and I'll put links below to if you want to get in hold with either us. I will put some links below in the show notes. So